is if you had a close-up of some wrinkles that you wanted to utilize, you can go in here and import an image. I don't know which one. We'll just go into. See if I can. All right, so let's say I wanted to bring this in. Okay, so I've loaded it, select it, and then add to Spotlight. Okay, so now we've got this floating image. Okay, I can move it around. I can use it to stamp or stencil. Right, this should be familiar from MCR. If you want to set it, hit the Z key. You need to manipulate again, Z. If you want to hide it, Shift Z. You can adjust opacity, you can adjust scale, and you can position multiple of these within your scene. Okay? So they are really nice to use. One thing to be careful with, under brush, samples, you're going to see spotlight projection. So what will happen is you'll load spotlight in, and you'll be like, okay, I want to sculpt over here. Okay, grab that, hide that. And you start to pan. Because you've got spotlight being used as a projection. So how does this work? If I move this over, set it. I'm stenciling with it. So this is a good technique. If you've got a lot of wrinkles you want to identify, this is by no way, shape, or form going to give you full wrinkles. But if you wanted to just tag some wrinkles in an area, you could use this to kind of stencil them up, and then at least now you have some identifiers. This is good for like wrinkles in tight areas. And if you watch the video from Kittleson, Ryan Kittleson on Linda, he uses it in a very similar fashion to generate some wrinkles. But if you want, a lot of modelers just use it as reference. So if we're going to use it as reference, what I want to do is go under Brush and turn off Spotlight Projection. That way it's no longer looking at it and I can sculpt and do whatever I need to do. Okay? So that's a really nice way to bring in some extra reference. Floating, in Maya, I loved floating reference images, which was basically a NURBS or a polyplane with texture on it. And then you could just move it around wherever you wanted and scale it and just position it. And then, hey, I'm working on an eye. Let me put a picture of an eye right next to what I'm working on so I don't have to trust my eyes to keep information as I'm looking over on another screen or something like that. So really cool way of utilizing reference. And again, you can hide it whenever you want. Now the other thing I'm doing here, because I was doing an arm study / cloth stuff, what I did was I loaded images into my background. Okay, so these are loaded right into the document. This is used a lot when you have a collage or a comp image. A comp image is a compilation image of many references. So if you had a t-shirt and you had a bunch of pictures of t-shirts and all the details that a t-shirt should have in it, close-ups of the sleeve, looking at the here, looking at what the bottom looks like, looking at what the seams look like, looking at what it looks like, an A pose. There's probably somebody standing in a t-shirt in an A pose that's similar to one that you're sculpting. You can load up your background with this. And what's nice is it's always there. The model's in front of it, right? So I can move. Sometimes you got to move it, and say, all right, cool, let me look at it this way. Let me look at this, right? So I can kind of check on some things. So this is done through Document, and you just do an import. So before you do this, what I would recommend if you go this route for some extra reference is you go in, you look at what your resolution is, you go into Photoshop, you generate a canvas with that exact resolution, give yourself some distance on the outside, and then start just comping images into it. Once you have that done, you'll come to the document, you'll hit import. And you'll bring that in. Okay? So that's kind of one of the ways. Now, if you are looking at real imagery, do not be afraid, right? Reference is my go-to. That is what's going to help me make this whole process a little easier. So I'm okay with going into Photoshop. And in this one, what I did was I upped the brightness and contrast and adjusted some of the levels so I can see the information that is sometimes hidden through a blown out image or something. So you can see over here, we can see the movement of the fabric. See all that nice information that wasn't there before, but now I can see it and I'm a better chance of replicating that. Okay? Sure problems. Go on to this one. Or I might have another one. Let's see. I just want to see if I've got one with a less built up sleeve. No, that's got it too. See how this one starts. It's all the information for the front. It is. Okay, so this will be kind of the process we're going to look at. I'll take it to somewhere about here, because this might be, ignore the back, we're looking at the front. Right? Imagine that everything has just got this kind of soft feel to it. We're going to go through and start building up a wrinkle and working it into the surface, a larger form wrinkle. And working that into the surface. Okay, that's going to be our goal. We'll go ahead and start right here with this one. I'm going to try and put in this type of information. Okay, so one, you'll notice that as far as resolution goes, there's enough to keep a clean structure. Right, but this is what I started with. And then we've got some more subdivisions. This resolution is not going to be enough. So imagine this is just a sleeve, and it's at 37,000. So you're gonna have to use more resolution as far as this process goes. If you're done, and you should be done with establishing the pieces, Dynamesh, unless you're gonna pull out a really large wrinkle form, Dynamesh should be no more. Turn it off. It doesn't mean that your geometry is going to magically change to regular topology. It's going to stay in that Dynamesh style wireframe layout. But you can now work more efficiently with regular subdivisions instead of trying to work Dynamesh all the way through. Okay? The other thing I would recommend is starting to get rid of inside surfaces. There's no need for them. They are nothing more than a waste. And as you start sculpture, sculpting in the wrinkles, you have a good chance of accidentally pulling the front surface or the back surface through the front surface. Okay, so starting to get rid of that, right? Because you're like, oh, my shirt's got to be 4.5 million. Does it? Or does it need to be 4.5 million because 2 million of those polygons are inside the shirt that we're never going to see? At that point, get rid of it. Right? Mask off the inside of the shirt. If you already have a poly group, you can use that, but you can get rid of that information. You don't see it, you don't need it. Okay? But you will need a good amount of topology to start pushing these wrinkles. In the back here, you can see that this has been evolved, right, with the back and the front. You can see even at this resolution, I'm starting to get tearing. I can still get a nice shape, though. I'm still able to push a pretty aggressive structure, but if I want to go further, I'm going to need more geometry. So right now I went up one resolution, one subdivision, and it went from, was it 30-something to almost 150,000. That's just a sleeve to start getting this resolution on it, okay? But chances are most of us will be a little bit lower. We'll give ourselves a little bit of information to work with. Now, you'll notice that some things are in the surface, right? I would do wrinkles first, then seams. But sometimes you need a visual cue. Something that says, here's a seam, here's a boundary. Let me make sure that I'm not stepping over that boundary. Let me make sure that I know where it is, because that might affect the wrinkle. The reason I'm saying follow that process is when you're doing wrinkles, you might be more broad stroke, and you're going to go right over an area that you've spent a lot of time making a real nice seam in the shirt, and then all of a sudden you're going to go smooth it out, and there goes your seam. Put them in, you can see there's a little bit of seam identification there. And here. So how did I make those? Very simple. I turned off my using my go-to brush, the clay buildup, turned off the alpha, made the brush really small, turned on lazy mouse, right? So when you go in and you look at lazy mouse, lazy radius up, so I get a nice clean line. Okay, I get some information in there. And now when I smooth it out, right, it's going to smooth out, but I don't have too much geometry to where I can't smooth anything. And I don't have too much to where I'm going to be sad if I do smooth it out a little bit. Now I've got some markers. I'm going to smooth it out a little bit. It's a little bit harsh. He's got these heavy seams there. The seam around the cuff here is almost so sharp that I might consider separating that and just tucking the end of the shirt underneath the cuff, because that's going to give me a stronger line. But I'm not worried about that. I would have worried about that in the previous week. There's going to be enough stuff to sculpt in here that you don't have to worry about. I'm going to smooth this out so we don't get confused as to what your structure will look like. Just smoothing it out. Okay? So you're starting with something that has good structure, good thickness, good layering, and it's ready to receive the wrinkle information. It's clean, ready to go. All right, so how do we start getting a wrinkle? Careful. All right, first you have to know what it is you're going to sculpt. And then second, you've got to figure out a plan. So some of the techniques are going to be just a sculpt. All right, just to take something like this. Say, all right, this is the image is a little backwards here, but there's enough information. And I'm not trying to replicate 100% on these because my character isn't that sleeve arm guy, but I'm looking at that to kind of see how the tension points are. You can see tension up at the top, draping more as we go down. So I could come in here and just say, all right, let's just draw these in. All right, your intensity is going to play a factor in there. But what inflate is good for is it kind of gives you some automatic structure, a little bit different. It kind of balloons a little bit more, and that's better than the regular, the standard brush. If you don't like it, undo it. Just identify right away right? So some people like this, and then once you get the wrinkle in, right, that's only half of the puzzle. Once the wrinkle is identified, we have to blend it and make it look right. That does not look right. This is a common thing. People stamp on details because they're not really looking at it, or they're not gauging time right, and then they have that Z-depth issue. So what we would do at this point is first see if we need to bring it up any more. Make this a little bit bigger. Bring that up, really get some volume on that. Okay, and now I'm going to switch to my move brush. Start pushing for that really nice contrast that we're seeing. Right, one thing I recommend is always checking your silhouettes from different angles. Because when you start sculpting and then you look from the side, there's like this big shape jetting out, and you're like, wow, I think you got to push that back. You got to be careful. Right? You can see I'm just using shoving technique, not really technique. But, one other thing you can do to really start getting that nice, crisp transition. Come just before the wrinkle, you mask that off. Make your brush a little bit bigger. You cool that both. And inflate is going to be a real nice tool. Don't add that. Looks crazy. And you got to watch out. This is too sharp as we go through. We want to blend. All right, so that's one way. The other way was what you saw in the history, which was masking and pooling. All right, so I'm gonna keep working with this one, but I want to show you the other one. Right? So basically, if I were to create one, I can go in Control. Invert, soften. You gotta be careful with that soften. I'm going to run into some problems when I'm starting to tear that geometry. So what does that tell me? I need more to pull any more information. Right, but when we do something like this, I can then take my brush and either pull this out. I can use the inflate tool down under deformation. But whatever you use, right, whatever you use to pull this structure forward, again, it's just a starting point. I would then take it, smooth it, start doing what I'm doing in this other one over here, and really making it feel like part of the shirt, not just this thing sticking off of the surface, not like vein work, right? Okay? So no matter how you go about it, whether you sculpt them in or you use another technique, you really want to make them look good. Okay? The other thing I've seen people do for larger form wrinkles, and this will require Dynamesh, would be to lay in a curved tube, have it taper front, top, start and end, and then Dynamesh that in and start blending it. That helps them get the large structural stuff Usually that large structural stuff would have been done the previous week, but if you wanted, you could see that I could have laid in a curved tube and then Dynamesh that in, right? Yeah, I think that would have worked. Yeah. Now, because the shirt sleeve is already opened up, if I Dynamesh it, what's going to happen? It's going to close up. It's going to close up all my holes, right? So, will it matter too much considering if it closes it up on the inside and I put the arm in there and I just let it intersect? Is that really a bad thing? Not for a sculpture. That's going to work out just fine. So you could get away with that kind of thing. You want to see what I'm talking about? Yeah, right. So, geometry. Now, Dynamesh, I'm going to need this a little bit higher, I believe. Not sure how big this is. We'll just see what that gives me. Let's just. I'm going to leave my lower subdivisions. I think I'm going to need a little bit more. Okay. So you see how it capped off the end? Let's bring that up a little bit more. I'm going to take off projection. So what is it telling me? By having to force this number so high, that tells me, is my model large or small? Small. Because it's taking more resolution within each grid unit to create the topology I need. If this arm covered 15 grid units, I could probably get away with 256. All right, so we've got that. You can see that even there, Dynamesh is going to hurt my ability to get some of these wrinkle shapes in there. But we've got that in there, so when I bring back the arm, I still get that sense of thickness on the sleeve. And if areas like this were a concern, I can pull that up. I can take that, mask it, pull it up a little bit, and create a little indent. Right, so I can still be very successful with a shirt piece that is solid like that. Cool? Cool. And that takes up less geometry than having two sides to your shirt as well. But since I built this with one side, we're okay. All right, so going in at this point, the rest of your job is making it work, right? Making this structure work nice on the surface. And that's just going to be shaping it, blending properly. All right, so I'm going to go in here, grab the clay. Now, I want to take off try and blend that in. Back a little bit there. Smooth it. The size a little bit. I'm just trying to get that to blend properly. Okay, but what else, as I go through and I'm shaping, what else is hurting the believability of the wrinkle? Right? It still has a lot of shaping to go, so I'll say shaping. But what else do you think is hurting this wrinkle from feeling like part of that sleeve and part of that fabric? Shadows. Good. Right? How so?
It just looks like there's shadows on both sides of it.
Okay. Yeah, but I think the contrast is creating, like, I think it's a little bit too sharp here based on maybe it needs to be darker here. Problem with these images is from 3D.SK, they shoot lights all over the place. But shadows, I definitely want to look at shadows and see, because it will be weird. Now, unfortunately in ZBrush, the lighting is very directional, so we may not be able to replicate the exact lighting that we're seeing, but that's a good thing to be looking at. Yes?
Something about the texture of the wrinkle almost feels like plastic.
okay? This would get into looking at the shadows and the transition. One thing that's gonna be hard is we're dealing with a surface that kind of looks shiny, and cloth is not shiny. So that's gonna hurt the ability. But let's talk about the texture for a second, right? How can we blend it? Look next to the wrinkle, and what do you see? Nothing but a smooth surface. So there's nothing blending this form with the rest of the shirt itself doesn't feel like fabric yet. So the next phase would be to help blend it into the shirt. This can be done before, it can be done after, but what we need is movement. You see all this other information? This will help break up this, because this is just shiny, it feels like plastic. This is shiny, it feels like plastic. This will start losing its sense of plastic-ness as I start adding more chaos to it, right? Because it should be perfect. Cloth is very organic, very chaotic. But the biggest thing that hurts a lot of wrinkles, skin wrinkles, details, is their ability to, the artist's ability to blend it into the rest of the surface. So one of the things you can do that's pretty quick is I'm going to take the plane buildup, and I'm just going to I'm looking at the direction. So the direction starts here and works into the armpit. Okay, that's the tension point on the sleeve going in. So we need some of this information. I'm going to do a series of pushing, pulling, changing shape. I'm going to change size. We're going to smooth it. As you see now, down in this area, we are creating more of a fabric feel. Is it look better, worse? Let's look at what it was before. Super plastic, shrink wrapped, all around that wrinkle. You start adding in some movement to the fabric, very chaotic, and it gives it that higher level of believability. And with doing that and shaping the wrinkle a little bit more, it starts to say, oh, okay, cool, this is looking better. Now another thing you can do, again, playing around, I was just sculpting those in, so when you have your character and they're standing there and their shirt is hanging, you can see, there might be some V-shaped wrinkles. Those are just really big, nice, broad strokes. Now, if you just are like, I'm going to make this up, without looking and studying your reference, it may fall apart really quickly. So look at it, know what you're doing, then go in there and add some nice, just broad stroke movement and characteristic to the fabric. Another way you could go about doing this would be by changing, right? So if you wanted to maybe add a little bit more cloth feel to it, we could maybe take color spray, right? Add an alpha back into it, or add something that's got a little bit more difference or noise, possibly. I don't really know how that's going to work out. I'm just playing around at this point. You have to have enough geometry to support it, but if I go in there and I just, and I really don't want you worrying about surface detailing, but let's bring this down. I'll break that up a little bit. It just adds a little bit more chaos to the surface to break up those highlights. Right? So, and what I'm doing is I'm using color spray. Why? Look, what do you know about alpha channels and masking? And look at that and tell me what's the benefit from using color spray?
It's erratic.
Yeah, it's erratic, it's random, perfect. It's gonna hit it with different sizes and different intensities. Right, so this is great for adding some irregularity to skin. You wanna add some of that nice dimpling that happens naturally with skin. Color spray is pretty cool. And I'm just adding something with a little bit more noise to it. Yeah, you wanna add in some skin wrinkles. Right, you can drag in the direction of the wrinkle you want. But again, surface detailing isn't something I'm really wanting you to get into. I would be more concerned with the structural elements of the asset you're creating. That's what I find important. Everything else is icing on the cake. So please make sure you're shooting for those solid shapes, forms, wrinkles, just getting that going. But if looking at it, it feels like plastic, and you're like, man, I just can't see past that, then yeah, go in there and add whatever's going to help you see it, right? There is noisemaker and things like that, but I really don't want to get into noisemaker and all that. So, okay, so adding seams, another thing that it's a good way to evolve a character. Right, we got that little seam down there. So how do we go about doing this? And somebody asked, how would you go about doing that the other day? I'm going to go in here and, we're just going to go stroke and make sure lazy mouse is on, turn our lazy radius up again. Intensity. Just want to say. Oh, hey. Now, I probably should have a little bit more geometry, so I'm going to go ahead and up-res it one time. A little bit of chaos there. Okay, and then I'm going to grab inflate. A little seam, you can try it with a pinch. Pinching areas. And you start developing a seam. And maybe a good idea, I'm going to go back into here and just make this regular. Sometimes pushing just past it a little bit. Helps sell. Blend it in. All right, now how far are we going to be looking at this? That's one way of doing it. Another way is going to be, I'll make one back here, which probably wouldn't have one back there, but I'm going to make one back there. This is going to be, we talked about this loosely the other day, control. It's too sharp, let's make this a little smaller. Invert, deformation, plate negative. Remember, this is just to get you something to start with. Smooth and continue. I'm more of a, like if you were to talk to James, right? When he was working here, he likes this method because he can go through the whole character and just go draw them on more of a hand sculpture, so I prefer that. Okay. What was the oh, yeah, panel looping. Now, if you're doing something like, I'm just going to bring up a different, well, actually, let's use his arm. Okay. So let's say we were making some kind of a superhero outfit. Right? I'm going to see if I can't start breaking apart some of this. All right, so first let's look and see what we have. Okay, that's not going to work for us. All right, we need a clean slate. We also need to make sure that we were done with the sculpture, so we're going to go geometry. It's got some subdivision. I'm going to delete lower. It's got one higher one. She's got two higher ones. Let's see where he's at. Geometry-wise. 0.4, that's probably a little high, considering it's just an arm. So let's go back there. Let's keep it there. Let's delete lower, delete higher. We'll keep it on this stage. Okay, so now what I would want to do is figure out a nice way to start generating polygroups. Okay, so for this, it's probably going to be easier, and since there's enough topology there to get a nice clean line, I'm going to go in and just hand paint some of these in. So if you have color blocking on your character or anything like that, this would be where you go with it. Okay, let's say we wanted something there. I'm going to go back to the poly groups and make sure group mask, I have polish turned on. I'm going to go ahead and group that. Okay, so sometimes you can utilize the slice tool, works out really nicely for stuff like this. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and clear my masks. I'm going to hide that upper piece. And I'm going to mask off the other area. You can do bandages this way, metal plating. Okay, Control W now, since I've already got my stuff set up. You can see we've got that in there. Okay, so let's just take a look at what this is going to do. I think you can spend all day making the color blocking. So there's that one character that's got, you know, the superhero outfit on. You see all the color blocking on it. I don't think anybody chose that one this month, but she's pretty cool. Pretty cool character. A lot of people that, how do I make all these seams in the clothing? Well, one, you can sculpt them, or you can try and utilize a tool. So I'm going to go in here, and you can see color block and color block. Okay, utilizing the poly groups. We're gonna go to geometry, and we're gonna use edge loop, panel loops. Okay, so let's just take a look at what they look like with the default. Kind of yucky. Looks like they're too thick. Okay, so remember this model is really small. And you can adjust thickness, you can tell it to polish, you can adjust the bevel profile. Right? So how many of you have that girl with the bionic arm that has all the paneling in it? I don't know if you brought that one forward or not, but on the leg, it's a great way to do it. Now for that, because it's so just symmetrical, not symmetrical, but just clean lines, we're not trying to form a custom shape. I'll just take a slice tool and then panel loop those, right? The other way to do it, if you needed different thicknesses, would be to generate the poly groups, split by group, and then extrude different thicknesses in the different areas. The difference with that is it's not going to give you the automatic bevel, right? I've got a chiseled bevel in here. If I wanted to change it, just like the profile curve, and it's the same kind of curve, I can change that. But pretty cool, right? I can go through there and just generate some nice panel loops. Alling is good, right? And you could do clothing seams this way, because you can smooth them, right, to make them look a little bit more like fabric. I can move them around, not like move them crazy, but within reason, I can go there and adjust my line. So maybe for some clothing seams, this might work out really nice. If you've got a heavier fabric and you want that nice visible seam, or you're doing, a lot of times I see for props and stuff, people do backpacks, they do pouches, and it just lacks the contrast. They take a sphere and they try and lump together this pouch, and I'm like, ugh, no, that doesn't feel good. But maybe if you drew out some, thought about how the fabric was put together and actually made it that way, made your panel loops around that, or made your poly groups and then panel looped them and got some nice thick indentions, we can go in here and we can work with it, right? I mean, I think it looks cool out of the gate, especially if we're doing a superhero, but if I take and I do inflating, I can inflate around the outside of that and kind of, make it feel more like fabric, okay? So remember, a lot of these tools, they do a certain thing, it's a means to an end. That's its job, right? This is what it does, okay? So pretty nice, neat little thing to do with panel loops. All right, we're going to go ahead and switch gears and get into facial features, okay? So wrinkles, seams, that's really your target for your clothing, making sure that belt loops and things and pockets, right? I did see somebody do a really nice pair of pants, and they had roughed in the sculpture of the pocket, but really what needs to happen at that point is mask it and extract out the pocket, because it'll look so much better having that lifted off the surface. It'll feel like a piece of fabric sewn onto another piece of fabric. So sometimes, right, think about going from week 1 to week 2 where we source the shape to generate our higher level details. We can do that again this week by sourcing a rough sculpt of a pocket and actually generating the pocket flap, right, making that a separate piece and working on it. Right? You find that, just like in Maya, we start repeating the same type of procedures over and over and over again, just at a small, what would appear to be a smaller level versus a very broad stroke level. Okay? All right, so getting into the head, the big thing is again, knowing the landmarks, some landmarks of the eye, right? And there's a lot of information, and hopefully you were studying that when you did the head study. But, again, that's more, making sure that things line up. But we're going to be looking at the eye. You've already situated the skull and the planes of the face, so you should have a good idea of where the eye should go. You should have a good idea where the lip should go. But what are some standards? What are some things that we need to see? Basically, an eye, the highest point of an eyelid is just to the inside of the pupil. The lowest point is to the outside of the pupil. That's kind of one of those common things. The shape, upper eyelid more almond shape, lower eyelid has a slight S curve, right? Picking up and then dropping out to the side. The upper eyelid, I've never seen anybody with an underblink, right? We can have an underbite, but an underblink, I don't think I've ever seen that. So the upper eyelid always overlaps the lower eyelid. And you can see that's what's going to help us create the crow's feet to the side. And there's also, it tells you why we can see more of the color from the bottom than the top. It also makes you understand why you can see the thickness of the lower eyelid is because it's swept underneath the eyeball more so than the upper eyelid. As far as size, 5 eyes across, right, you can see if we were to measure from here to here, then from here to here, and then from here to here, it's 5 eyes across, right? Nice standard measurement. And I would always push you, create some of these standard things and then shape it to your reference. And then once you get a feel for that, you're going to be more able to follow your reference and get all these landmarks in. As far as the ocular cavity shape, we're always going to drop a little bit to the outside into the cheek, right? You're going to feel a triangular feature just underneath the lower eyelid. You're going to pick up the bag structure, which is going to be tighter here and then fade out to the side. You're going to have a nice sharp crease in the upper eyelid to the hood, and then you've got that nice way that wraps up and into the forehead. So these are the shapes we want. Look at the depth from the nose to the tear duct. I should not be able to see the tear duct from the side of the face. If it's a lizard, maybe. If it's a badger, maybe, but they have different skull structures. Okay? The nose itself, you're going to have a triangular pattern. Let me one, it's a very planar structure. You can see the basic polygon layout. And if you're ever wondering, how do I get better at seeing shape, drawing out planes is a great way to start seeing. And you can color them in, right? It's a nice shadow, so this comes off of the face. But the basic building blocks of a nose, we have a triangular wedge. A diamond shape for the bridge of the nose, and then we have a circle for the tip of the nose. Those come off of the face, and then we can start generating the outer nostril and some of the other shapes. So looking at it further, you can see inside the nostrils from the front. Okay, and if we were to look at this you can see the planes of the nose. You see a flat plane here, and then transitioning into the bottom of the nostril. Right? That is really helpful with learning how to break down the shape, is looking at it more of a planar way. But you can see here the nostril picking up and then dropping to the side. From the side, most noses I've seen have this really nice S curve. From the side, picking up, sweeping down, getting into the lips. Lips are very similar to the eyes. You're going to have an overlap of the upper lip to the lower lip. This is going to create the pillars of the mouth on the side. You can see these structures. The pillars. You've got this nice rounded feature on the side there. You can see the overlap, upper lip to lower lip. And again, looking at that plane change, if we were to drop in the planes, start breaking down that shape a little bit. Okay, let's look at the lip in the front. Right, we're gonna have Cupid's bow on the top. Watch out for characters that are smirking. Stick to one side. Cupid's bow on the top and the elvish long bow. Okay. You are going to see the corners of the mouth disappear into the meat, right? The pillars of the mouth on the side, so nice fleshy feel there. And then the next thing I would tell you to focus on are the fat pockets of the mouth. A nice triangular feature here, oval on left and right, and then a larger oval with an indent right on the lower. These are things you just put in. And you just, I'm going to make a mouth. These are things I want to see. Now, on cartoony characters, it's different. You're going to have to find your own reference, your own building blocks and landmarks for those. But a lot of times, cartoon stuff is generated from reality. So, I would go back to our what do they call that thing? Pinterest boards, right, where you have all that anatomy stuff, and look at some of those images again as you're sculpting the mouth, the eyes, and all that. I mean, a lot of this stuff we've got the same information, right? You can see here. This is all online for you as well. So utilize it. Wrong. Right. It shows you those pockets. Shows you variations and how those things are still visible in those variations. Look at that. I can take that information and generate a workflow in ZBrush. I don't know, beam. It is. It's a beam bleach. See? So how would I make this? Give me the brush used and some of the procedures you would use to get that shape on the side of your lip. Clay build up. Okay, smoothing it to blend it. If you know the thickness, one of the good brushes that is a little different than clay buildup that a lot of people like to get into is clay tubes. Really, the difference on clay tubes is you get a constant build. Right, so it kind of brings it up a layer, per se. There is a layer brush, which is pretty cool. It actually pulls things out in a set distance based on your intensity. So this one, if you're putting in features, you can change the alpha and just draw it in, you'll get a constant thickness. Right? It's a little bit less sketchy as the other brush. So maybe it'll help you when you start getting into this type of procedure. But again, if you're just trusting that you can see all the information you need from your sketchy drawing, you're just making life a little bit harder for yourself. Okay? I would strongly recommend filling in some information. Let me see if I've got a decent structure here. Okay, now, it's funny, when this head first hit the scene, we thought we wouldn't know and started submitting. I know that. All right, so you can see this would probably be where you're at, right? Your character's head, it should be separate. And, I mean, if you can see the connection, it wouldn't be separate, but you've got the head there. You've got the ocular cavities, planes of the face taken care of. And you're ready to start working on eyelids and everything like that. So we'll talk about eyes first, and then get into just the general procedure on other structures You're just looking at the shape and sculpting, you're making that happen. So what usually trips people up is how do I begin? How do I get that going? Well, if I were to, look at lips, we'll go ahead and just look at lips first. I know I said eyes, I'm sorry. All right, so on this one, we need a little bit of buildup. There's no geometry that's there for that. So I've got to figure out, do I want to just work with subdivisions, or do I want to start working and actually putting, more time, like more resolution and building up more volume. I'm not quite sure, so I'm going to go with this a little bit longer. Let's double up on my resolution there. Okay. Right, and then you instantly just come in and say, all right, cool. Remember, keeping it simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse this brush a little bit. Okay. Now we can work with it. And we can go through here and say, all right, cool, what do we need to do? Let's start tucking some stuff in the face a little bit more. Make your brush as small as you need. I'm going to work with the proportions of his head, just because it's going to be a little bit easier. Putting in some markers. Right, so I've established the pillars. We've got the lower lip started. The main shapes. See, we don't really have a lot of geometry here. You can still work with it. Right, so quickly though, just hitting up landmarks, you can see you start refining it. But pretty quickly we can get something and really it starts to feel, zoom out, it starts to feel a little bit better. Feels more like lips, and he's got a cartoony look to his face. And I'm just trying to get some basic information out there. Okay? Just following, just going off of the standards of a lip. Okay? Now that it's there, if I did have a picture of the actual target lips I was going for, I could start moving some of this stuff around, making the lips feel a little bit thinner, or so on and so forth. Now, that's just sculpture. It's sculpture. Another thing you can do, if you're doing cartoony lips, you have larger lips, or you haven't really established anything there yet. I've seen people take the curved tubes, lay a curved tube across the upper lip and the one along the lower lip. That gives them independent structures that they can shape. So they can actually shape the upper lip independent of the lower lip and not worry about these things jamming together. Because as soon as I update with Dynamesh, it could, if I don't have enough resolution, it's going to lose all of that shape in between, right? It kind of looks like it's smirking. You want to straighten that up. But that's another technique. If you like to work on independent structures, and then when you get it to where you want it, you go ahead and seal the deal with Dynamesh using them to the face, you can do that. But if you want to keep it simple, just sculpt them. Right? Get in there and sculpt them, and pretty quickly you can generate something that feels a little bit more like what it should. Now, when I said I was staying to his proportions, if you're ever getting into design, there are nice triangular patterns you can follow. And one of them for design-wise, so if you look at Gru, his face is kind of squished. Most of the time, his mouth is really wide, right? So if you take a measurement from here straight down to the side of the nostrils, you should hit the lips. Nice triangular pattern. It's one of the ways to kind of keep the face in proportion with itself. Does it mean that it's always that way? No, but it's a good starting point. Right? From the side, we got the pillar structure. We can feel the bottom lip. The overlap is there. I think that works out pretty nicely. The nose would be the same thing. You start sculpting in the nose. You should already have something there kind of blocked in. At this point, though, to see the contrast in the lip, we want to pull that same kind of contrast in the nostrils, pushing the nostrils up, and generating that shape. The next biggest thing that people struggle with is eyes. How do we create eyes? What do we look for? We already talked about the actual landmarks of an eye, but now you look at what do you want to see, as far as build method for an eye. Well, first things first, you can just sculpt it. If you're using Dynamesh, put an eye sphere in there and sculpt it up, right? An eyelid, okay? And you're like, but it's cartoony. I don't see any eyelids on mine. Well, you better find some because it needs to have eyelids. So there's a lot of stuff here that you can reference that have cartoony eyelids that will give you information on how to make those. I actually found another one, I believe, on the desktop here. Really cool. With the eyelids there, still has a really nice eyelid in there. And you can see the lips here, following some of the stuff that we would want to see, but again, still cartoony. And this is where, if you're like, well, my character's too cartoony, I don't know where to go. This is the kind of image you would search for reference. It looks good. It's got good shape. I can read it. That's what I'm going to pull my mouth shape from. That's what I'm going to pull my eyelid shape from, the nose shape. That's going to be my target because that's mine. Anytime I'm working on something, I look for what's my end result look. What is the final look supposed to be? I'll find that and then gear everything towards that. So again, get out there and check stuff out. But as far as creating an eyelid, a couple other methods. I'll go ahead and just get one started. Right. So if I go into Subtool, I'm going to do insert and just insert a sphere 3D. Perfect size. It's good. This character's got some shift there to get a little bit. Perfect. Now the problem here is the ocular cavity wasn't really generated all that well. So you might find that you have to push the structure back. You also can start utilizing, this is kind of helpful when you're getting into stuff like this. Put on transparency and ghosting so you can see the size of the structures. Right, now he would have obviously bigger eyeballs than the normal. Okay. I love that picture of the anime eyes. It's like what the eyeball size would really be, and they're really going through each other if they had accurate eyeballs. So he would be the same way. If I'm doing a human eye sphere, I'll usually let it touch or overlap slightly the eye sphere, so I'll put one in the center. I'll scale them up so they're just kind of going off the 5 eyes across. But you can't really go with that on the actual eyeball because it's round and it's a little wider than the eyelid itself. But what I would do is if I was going to go down the road of wanting to work with separate pieces like I would the lip, and I didn't want to just sculpt an eyelid in, I want to kind of do some work or have the computer do some work for me. So I'm going to go ahead and switch that, turn off transparency, and get into kind of pushing the structure in a bit more. Now we have to, one of the reasons I turned my sphere is because I use that hole as the pupil, right? It kind of gives me a little bit better recognition on what we're going to see. And it also tells me, if I keep the eye where it is, I mean, his eye is going to look like he's just kind of staring into, crossing his eyes, I guess. So I want to take that into consideration, but we'll just work with it for time purposes. Okay. So what I'm going to do here in this case is, if I wanted to continue, remember, I could just sculpt eyelids with Dynamesh and pull them out, and just really go rough in the beginning, establish them, and then start refining them. Totally sculpt the eyelids in, but again, some people like that more technical approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize the sphere. I'm going to duplicate it, and this is so much easier considering we have these tools. I mean, this just makes your life ridiculously easy. So you go ahead and you scale it up slightly. We switch to clip rectangle. Go ahead and solo it. And then what I'm going to do is I've got my clip rectangle. Go in here, activate it. Go back to the middle. Flip it. Okay? Now when we look at the other, let's take this one. You can see we get a little bit of eyelid. We can go ahead and here we can rotate. Pick that up. Okay, and this isn't going to be perfect, but this gives me something that I can maybe start with. If I want the eyelids over here, or I'm saying, you know what, I'm not quite sure. Let me go ahead and rotate this forward again. I want the eyelid a little bit more on point. Then I'm going to take this and duplicate. Okay, I can scoop it underneath. Lower eyelid. Right? And now I have these two structures. I can Dynamesh into the head. And I can shape them too. If I want to take the upper eyelid, right, we just move back to the move brush, and I can go in here, and just like any type of geometry, right? I can shape it, position it, do all this other stuff, but to really make it work better with my structure, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do that merge down. Dynamesh. Well, and now I can start shaping and working with it. Okay? I would take more time to make sure that they were situated right and they, I worked the upper eyelid and lower eyelid before I Dynameshed it in, but that's something I can go through and do. This works okay for a human eye, okay for a cartoony eye. It's not going to do the work for you, but it's a nice way to get started. The other way I've seen people do, it works, but it takes a little bit more time and finesse, is by utilizing curved strap. They'll draw a curved strap over the eyeball upper and then over the eyeball and the lower, and generating a separate eyelid. I kind of like this sphere method a little bit better because it's just easier to work with. What happens with the other one is you're actually creating an ocular cavity with an eye bag in it, because when you Dynamesh the eyelid into the rest of the head, it's generating this tiny structure, this wall, and that gives you some problems sometimes. So this right here, you hide the eye sphere, I can get in there and start working with it a little bit more. Okay? But, that's a cartoony eye. It's not, realistic or anything. If you're going realism, follow the process I did on the lips. That's going to help you out, just kind of generating those. And a nose a nose can be done in like 5 minutes. Just hit up those main core shapes and then shape it to your character. So, is any of this super easy? Not really, but hopefully you've gotten a good start and you're probably finishing up on your props and you're getting ready this weekend to spend, tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday, hammering in these clothing wrinkles and facial details. For submission, I will talk about submission on Monday because I want to make sure we lay things out properly so I can see what I need to see in the week 3 submission. Okay? Questions? Comments? Concerns? Okay. All right, well, have a good